Now I'm going to present you Dr. Fiona Gray, who is an Australian architect and Living Future accredited practitioner. She is the founding director of Living by Design, a consulting firm specializing in biophilic design and building biology principles, inspired by nature's ingenuity in shaping the built environment. With a wealth of diverse executive experience, Fiona has served as the CEO of Renew, a national nonprofit organization dedicated to sustainable living, and as city design lead in local government, and as an adjunct associate professor in urban design and ecologies at Deakin University. Forgive me if I'm not saying it right. At the heart of Fiona's work is the steadfast commitment to creating sustainable, healthy, and equitable built environments that prioritize the well-being of both people and the planet. And something that I'm very excited to talk about her. And she just mentioned that she's creating, or she's about to launch this amazing book for children, a children picture book, which is called Praetle and the Blooming City, which is an creative, an illustrative book, and it's based also, or it's also bringing biophilic design to kids. It's for children between 4 and 7 years old, and this is bringing her creativity. She's a very creative person, so these are beautiful things to look forward. And I'm sending all the success with this amazing book, Fiona. And with all this said, I'll give now the microphone and the stage to Fiona. So the stage is all yours. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and
And,
and
and I,
to say welcome, and go ahead, Fiona.
what I'm presenting on today it's titled Designing Thriving Ecosystems Through Biophilic Design and Wellbeing Science. And this is based on some research that I published in August, late last year, as part of a special issue of the Architecture Journal, which is an academic journal. And it was part of a special issue about biophilic design for health and well-being, specifically in schools. So it had a very sort of specific remit. And this is an open access journal, so anyone can download it. You can visit the website there. I'll put the address, or you can grab the QR code if your screen's not too small, and you can see that QR code. But anyway, you can just Google and you'll find the article if you want to read it in more detail. And I encourage you to do that. That would be great, and I'd love to hear any feedback on it. So basically, this when this call out came for submissions to this special issue, there was someone that I thought of immediately. I mean, I was really attracted to the idea of this, but I also felt like I didn't quite have all the expertise really to put in an academic paper on my own. I really felt like, because it had such an important focus on schools, and even though I've designed schools, I just the well-being in schools was not something that I was fully across, but I knew someone who was, and that was my son's former school teacher, Andrea Downey. So this is a photo of my son 14 years ago now. This is beautiful Andrea. You seen my mouse move? Yeah, and this here is my gorgeous son, the tall lanky kid in the back row. And my son had been homeschooled up until grade 6, so, and that was really due to him having a raft of life-threatening allergies. So he was allergic to so many things. It was impossible to manage within the school environment. He was allergic to apples. He couldn't come in contact with an apple. So it was, his allergies were quite extreme. So we homeschooled him. And then as his immune system started to mature, he decided that he wanted to go to mainstream schooling, and that was at around grade 6. So we enrolled him in school, and really we could not have gotten any luckier with the teacher that he got, because he was assigned to Andrea's class, and because he hadn't been to school prior to that, we needed to do a lot of liaising with Andrea, because really how we had home educated was very free range kind of education, and we followed his interests, and we didn't really follow a formal curriculum. And so, he was learning heaps, but he was learning at his own pace, following, going down rabbit holes that interested him. So he was not used to a structured way of being educated. So, we had to work with Andrea to get him used to what school life was all about. And what I found in Andrea was this incredibly dedicated, incredibly empathetic, and really a very, I would say, a gifted teacher. You know how some people just have that gift for teaching? She had that gift. And at that time, I was actually designing Steiner schools. So we had a lot of these, we had reason to be having conversations quite regularly, and we just kept finding all of these overlaps in our thinking between her ideas on education, my ideas on education as a lay person trying to, teach my kid, and we just couldn't get over the alignment in our thinking. Even though we're from completely different disciplines, our way of approaching, I suppose, our worldviews just kept colliding, and we really gelled with each other. But we'd never really, we'd never really found a way to work together. It was just this sort of connection that we felt. And after my son left Andrea's care, she then she became a school principal for a period, I think, and then she moved on and moved into wellbeing science, and she went back and did extra study and became a wellbeing scientist. So really, when this call out for this paper was presented, I just thought, oh my goodness, like, this is a perfect opportunity to bring the idea of school design, wellbeing science together, and biophilic design being my sort of particular area of interest, together, and figure out what could that look like as a collaboration between the two of us. I'm going to have to say, this sort of really interdisciplinary approach was such a great experience, because it really, I think it broadened both our horizons and allowed us to sort of create this innovative framework for understanding and addressing student wellbeing in educational environments. And we coined that process throughout this research, the biophilic wellbeing systems approach, and that's essentially what I'll be discussing in more detail today. So I just thought I'd share that little sort of how it came to be. So I'll start with the context, and I'll note at the outset that given Andrea and I are both Australian researchers, the data that I'll present to you it's predominantly Australian data, but I really think that much of what we will discuss will have correlations across the world, applicability in many places. So, it may be grounded in the statistics for the Australian context, but certainly relevant in many, many places. So the issue of designing for wellbeing in educational settings, we know it's become increasingly critical, and I wanted to share some of those statistics with you of why we felt this work is just so important. So we have a thing called the Mission Australian Youth Survey, and that's conducted every year, and there's about 20,000 participants that submit their data. The most recent one of that survey found that 30% of young people, it's young people who participate in this, identified mental health as a major issue, and 32% expressing a deep personal concern about that. So that they expressed that they were either extremely or very concerned about mental health. The only thing that topped mental health was environmental issues in terms of concerns for young people. So 40% of respondents said that mental health, that environmental issues were their biggest concern, and that was for the second year in a row. other statistics told us that globally, 1 in 7 young people aged between 10 and 19 experience a mental health disorder, making up 13% of the global disease burden for this age group. So, it's having a very significant impact on our young people. And in Australia, mental ill health affects nearly half of all adults over their lifetime, with suicide being the leading cause of death among Australians aged 15 to 49 in 2019. They were the latest statistics that I could get. So these statistics, they really start to underscore the need for innovative approaches that integrate wellbeing into educational environments. They're quite alarming and concerning statistics. And then when we look at the classroom, there's also, certainly for the Australian context, and I think we're doing more poorly than the European context in this regard, we have students receiving a total of 11,000 hours of classroom time, which is the highest in the whole of the OECD, yet they perform lower in international assessments compared to peers in similar countries. Now, a lot of people think Australia is a country where, we have high standards for our education, but these statistics are telling us that we are lagging behind. We also know that our students spend around 70% more time in the classroom than their Finnish counterparts, but they achieve significantly lower scores in international assessments compared to students in similar countries. So this discrepancy really, to us, indicates that classroom time doesn't necessarily equate to academic success, and suggests the need for a more comprehensive approach that considers overall well-being of students to enhance educational outcomes as well as well-being outcomes. So it's sort of there's a double edge to this. So given these really significant challenges, we see biophilic design as a really important part of the solution, because we think that if we can incorporate biophilic design, there's an opportunity to enhance student and staff well-being, and at the same time be addressing those concerns that students have around the environment as well. We can promote environmental stewardship and ultimately contribute to a healthier planet.
Thank you, Mason, for that question. Anyone else, any comments? Doesn't have to be necessarily a question.
I would like to thank Dr. Fiona, because I was really glad and happy to see how in Australia the indigenous were like taking more and more in account with these schools. And I had a question then, because the schools you showed were mainly in Victoria. That's more in the south. Are there others in around Sydney or in the north that are also applying that?
I'm sure there are. It's not. It's certainly not mainstream. So it was kind of hard to know what schools were doing that kind of work unless we kind of could go and see them ourselves, because I think this may not be fair, but a fair assessment. But I think, we're further behind than many other countries in our understanding of biophilic design, and what it really encompasses and what it means. There is, I think, a more superficial understanding of what biophilic design is. So I don't know that it's embedded in a really holistic way in a lot of schools. So we did struggle to find case studies, but that doesn't mean they're not out there. I mean, Australia is a very, very big country. So actually knowing what is it'd be like traveling five other countries away to know what's happening in Western Australia. I did hear of one, a builder was actually telling me a few weeks ago about one in Western Australia that is doing some exciting things, but it was all very secret at that stage. So I don't know which school it is or what's happening with that. But So I think there are some, but I would say they're more the exception than certainly the exception than the rule, and that's why I would love other people to pick up this research and say, oh, we've got a fantastic example of that happening here in Queensland, or that I just don't know exists yet.